How do you see EQ versus IQ in sales? What is more important, or is it a balance?
Fundamentally for me, EQ is more important. I'm being respectful to IQ, but I would suggest that EQ is more important.
Right. EQ needs to be developed. IQ can be acquired. Two questions. Is it important to involve the salespeople in this entire intervention? Two, do you see organizations really doing this?
So yes, it's important that they should be involved in the process. Do we do it enough? Probably not.
I would love to know about your journey from sales to HR.
I met somebody after winning a competition, and this is the importance of networking for salespeople. So that was the catalyst, and then suddenly I entered this world of HR.
The whole concept of AI with HI is kind of missing out, where AI has been spoken more than HI. Do you see that companies are really keeping up to the pace?
If I look across different organisations in different sectors, they're at different speeds of adoption. Financial services sector, we're very much ahead of the curve in terms of AI, the impact that it has on sales. Point of phrase, always respect history but educate for the future. The last couple of years have been pretty phenomenal in tech, and I think we're all very much aware of how AI is influencing the workplace. I think also expectations are what people want. They're wanting now a much more personalised, tailored experience to learning and developing. There's also different generations in the workplace which are expecting different things as well. AI is a tool, it doesn't do everything for you, but you still need a human to make that interaction, and more so in sales, right?
Are you seeing a gap which is getting wider between the younger generation and the earlier generation, or do you see that there's a cross-learning which is happening?
I start with my daughters. So my daughters are sort of in their 20s, and I learn from them around how they like to learn, and they educate me around the different aspects of technology that I'm not even aware of.
Well, it's said that the success of any business ultimately comes down to its people. But how do you create an environment where talent really thrives and leadership really strengthens and performance really soars, especially in today's consistently evolving business world? That's exactly what we'll explore today, and I'm excited to welcome Craig Austin to Sales Igniter. Craig is a global strategic HR leader with over 35 plus years of experience in business and human resources. Craig really works closely with senior leaders to shape business culture, enhance their employee experience, and drive talent development, which is so critical. He's also a recognized thought leader in HR excellence, a keynote speaker, and a passionate advocate for unlocking human potential. So, Craig, welcome to the show, and I'm so elated to have you with us, and thank you for honoring this show, and I'm really excited to have the conversation going.
Thank you for having me, Lena.
So, Craig, to start with, there's so much happening in the last couple of years, right, when it comes to talent, and really the way organizations are adopting with regards to talent development. How do you see the shift in the last 3 years when it comes to enabling teams, and how is that impacting business growth and sales in specific? I would love to hear.
Look, the last couple of years have been pretty phenomenal in terms of tech, and I think we're all very much aware of how AI is influencing the workplace.
Yeah.
And without a doubt, that's been a big feature of the last 3 years in my professional opinion. I think also expectations are what people want when they're in that environment. They're wanting now a much more personalized, tailored experience to, learning and developing. And there's also different generations in the workplace which are expecting different things as well. So I think we have to kind of cater for all of that. But when you think about the technology, the AI, and the pace of the AI, it's been pretty phenomenal, and something that I'm massively passionate in. In fact, I've just done another MBA in HR with an AI discipline, just so I can keep myself up to speed, and I guess earn the right to come and talk to great people like you, right? It's kind of how I see it. But impact on sales and sales management is going to be massive. It currently is, and I think for those organizations that maybe haven't really woken up to the importance of how that's all embedded within their strategies and cultures of organizations, need to do so very quickly because it's evolving at a rapid pace. So hopefully that kind of answers the start of the 10 question.
Brilliant. Because I think we're still in the post-COVID state is what I would believe in. And then technology just came right in front of us with AI, right? And the whole concept of AI with HI is somewhere kind of missing out, where AI has been spoken more than HI. Right. I think from a strategy perspective, as you mentioned, all of this should be consistently embedded. And AI, I'm a definite advocate of AI, because we need to be adapting to the change, like you very, very rightly said. But do you see that companies are really keeping up to the pace in enabling their talent? Because that is what is going to impact the growth, right? And especially in sales, you see that sales teams, you are in talent development, you are in leadership development. So how are you seeing that companies are really adapting to it? Because adapting is such an important factor you mentioned.
I think the honest answer to that is probably, if I look across different organizations in different sectors, they're at different speeds of adoption. So financial services sector, which is a sector I've been operating in recently, very much ahead of the curve in terms of AI, the impact that it has on sales, in terms of the modeling, in terms of how people are educated on the tools to actually utilize those, the options that they've got. There are other organizations that are maybe not in that space yet, relying on sort of traditional methods of doing that. And look, traditional methods are always important. We can't, I coin a phrase, always respect history, but educate for the future, right?
Wow,
and
that's
something that I always tend to have as a motto when I kind of look at developing anything for any organization that I work for. But impact on sales leadership, sales management, all of that stuff will be impacted by technology.
Right.
And I think for those organizations that haven't yet maybe woken up to the importance of that adoption, they need to do so very quickly, because it's here to stay. And I think it's only going to get bigger.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Hence why I always like to keep myself fresh with knowledge.
I love what you said. History is important, but educating yourself is also a very important factor to move ahead, right? Keeping yourself adaptive.
Agree.
So in this whole process of, transitioning from what we were and what we are getting into, and I wouldn't say getting into, I think we're right there in the middle of, transformation. How are you seeing organizations really building winning teams? When I say winning from all aspects, not only revenue numbers, but from a holistic aspect. Is there a formula? Is there your experience have you seen in your banking industry or in multiple other industries you have been? Is there a formula for it? And I would love to know that.
It's a great question, because I think that's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is the formula to success for all of that work? So maybe I'll answer that in a couple of ways. I think firstly, you need to take a step back and look at the culture of the organization and the impact that has on people. So why do people want to work there? Mm-hmm. For those organizations that I've seen that have been really successful with this, they're breeding a culture of engagement. Employees feel motivated. They're very clear on the roles and responsibilities. For salespeople particularly, it's not always just about the financial benefits. I'm starting to see a very clear desire for people that are in sales to enable them to become more successful. Okay. They want to understand the career paths. They want to understand what learning journeys they should take. Okay. There's an expectation now that there will be personalized learning journeys for them. So the historical one-size-fits-all, I would suggest, doesn't work anymore as well as it maybe used to. Traditional training methods even as well. I think I mentioned this just now with the AI piece. There is an expectation that when somebody wants to learn, they will learn when they want to learn, not when it's dictated to them. So the use of mobile phones, learning experience platforms, real customized learning when they want it is definitely something that I'm seeing as an expectation now from individuals, certainly in the sales arena. Definitely.
Okay. And that could be like really moving from, like you said, not moving completely from traditional, because that is important as well, but really adapting to the newer ways of learning could be one of the ways of building a winning winning culture of sales. And,
Agree.
is that what I'm taking away from this?
Yeah, it is. It is. But I think also you need to think about how that gets managed and how that gets led, right? So I think in simple terms, a manager, a historical manager would obviously manage a sales environment and a team in a certain way, certainly in my experience. But I think going forward, that now needs to change. So they need to be given themselves the right skills. Do they fully understand how to use technology? Do they fully understand the expectations of their workforce? Are they close enough to their teams? Do they really understand what motivates them? And probably a bigger question to ask is, do they actually know how they like to learn?
Yeah,
How many
I like
sales
that.
leaders just assume they like to learn like they like to learn, right? So these are all things that I think need to be factored in. But zooming out a little bit, when you come to managers and leaders of sales teams and organizations, it is dependent on the culture that you create. And I think in today's society, people tend to want flexibility. They want to be able to operate on a bit more of their terms. Now, when I grew up, it was very much you do as you're told in an organization.
Absolutely.
That's how it is.
Yeah.
But there is not a revolt, but there's a real push now for different generations to work but on their terms. So it's not just about working on their terms. How do we support them in a sales capacity to enable them to be successful? Maybe doing things differently through technology. And hence my point earlier that people in those roles need to fully understand and embrace the fact that that technology is here to stay and will grow. And it's about the mindset that you have to deploy with it. So you have to grow with it, not just let it go away from you.
No, that's interesting. That how do you actually understand what is the way the person wants to learn rather than you dictating, because that's no more going to work because of the exposure to information different people have, and different people have their own style. And I like the point you brought in that there's a different generation which is entering into the workforce. And we already have an earlier generation there, and we have a younger generation coming in, and both of them have a different way of learning because that's how their conditioning has been. But so are you saying that, are you seeing a gap which is getting wider between the younger generation and the earlier generation? I don't want to call it older generation, but I would say wiser generation. Do you see that gap is widening, or do you see that there's a cross learning which is happening? I mean, is it reverse learning rather, I would say? I mean, I would love to hear that. I mean, you must be going through this in the HR, function you've been in. And I heard that you've also been in sales, which we spoke about. So how are you seeing this? Like, do you see that gap happening a lot more, or is there?
So I think the gap is because people are aware of the gap. So we have to just be really clear on this. I think people now are becoming aware of technology and also what the generations expect. I'll come back to a point you just phrased, which is probably something I do a lot, is a bit of reverse mentoring. And I start with my daughters. So my daughters are sort of in their 20s. And I learn from them around how they like to learn, and they educate me around the different aspects of technology that I'm not even aware of. So, but I think that also comes back down to a mindset of the individual, because if you've got a mindset that's conditioned to learn, and as an executive coach, I think, coaching is a skill that I deploy a lot. And that always helps the brain to create new wiring. So respecting the old wiring that's in there, which is that traditional kind of way of doing things. And I have a coach myself, and it's something that I value very highly. But I think also there's a gap that's created as a result of this. And I see it in my daughters, if I keep it personal just for a minute. The expectation of how they operate is predominantly through tech, WhatsApp and TikTok and all of the latest tools. But that also creates a gap for them. And I would suggest that's in the softer skills of life, such as your emotional intelligence and the ability to what we would call, and I'll use the traditional way of building strong relationships with people, developing trust and all of those things that sometimes gets missed when you are, educated in a certain way, right? In the tech space. And I've definitely seen a bigger demand for helping people bridge that gap. So I think we just need to be careful what we mean by the gap, because I think there's always going to be a gap, because some people won't want to embrace AI. But I think those people in the sales forces, sales management, sales leadership, I think will be smart enough to understand that it does play a role. AI is a tool. It doesn't do everything for you, and it
Yeah.
can support,
It's a
as
tool.
can all of the technology. They are tools,
Yeah.
but you still need a human to make that interaction, and more so in sales, right? Because
Right.
it's emotional.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that point. And this is what I always, whenever I speak to and ask a question that is buying emotional, logical, it's a confusing answer. They say, oh, it's logical because, I'm buying this because I know this is going to help me. And then, so I said, help me is again emotional, right? So as humans, we're all emotional beings. And that brings me to a very, very interesting, I mean, I would love to hear your perspective on, is EQ more important or IQ in sales? I mean, of course, across, I'm just kind of keeping sales as a center because, as you mentioned, that emotional quotient is such an important factor. And people are so tech savvy now, the young generation, which is important because extremely important because that's the world they're entering. We are at the transition between the earlier life and the new life. So we're able to at least look at it differently. But today's generation is born into it. So how do you see EQ versus IQ in sales? And what is more important, or is it a balance?
So it's a really good question. I was talking at an event not so long back, actually, where we had this very question come up. And I actually facilitated the question to a group of people, and we had a mixed generation in that room. And one of the things that I learned from that, because I love to learn through other people's responses, is that IQ traditionally has always been the thing that gets people to the table, gets people into a role, mixed with a bit of experience. But I think what I'm definitely seeing now, as the different generations are entering the workplace, if I look at sales forces, sales processes and methodologies, there is a far higher reliance and importance needs to be put on the emotional intelligence aspect, witithout a doubt. So it's the ability to read things as a human. And I think technology will never be able to do everything that a human can do. Now, in years to come, I may look back on this podcast and say, maybe I was incorrect, right? Who knows where it goes? But
absolutely.
I think fundamentally for me now, certainly in that sales space, the EQ piece is more important. I'm being respectful to IQ, but I would suggest that EQ is more important for somebody to really harness and understand.
Right, because EQ needs to be developed. IQ can be acquired. I mean, you're so much of information overload out there, and you really, gasping so much of input and then articulating it, which even your buyers are doing, or your clients are doing, or the people whom you're talking to are doing. But EQ has to be consistently developed, and I mean, as you mentioned, that because you're dealing with humans who's making decisions based on your discussion and multiple people's discussion, EQ again supersedes IQ. And do you see a lot of, because in my experience, when I talk to sales leaders or I talk to organizations, I'm seeing that one missing part of EQ training or EQ coaching or EQ coaches being aligned to salespeople as mentors are very, very. I mean, it's missing. I mean, do you see again? This is to do with sectors, or organizations are typically missing that part and specifically talking about technical skills.
So a bit of both, really, without sounding like a politician. I actually see some organizations that are sort of aligned to the future skills requirements of both individuals, sales individuals and managers and leaders, and they are embracing that and adjusting. But I think also there are organizations where it's missing, right? And I think anyone can pick up a book and go onto YouTube and see a piece on emotional intelligence, but what does it really mean to that individual? And I would suggest, certainly in the sales management and sales leadership space, this is such a critical skill, right? If you don't have that ability to connect using EQ to your individuals, kind of hooks back up to the original point around culture and the organization that people work for. And sales people are, normally they drive hard, having been in sales myself and understanding the pressures of targets and all of that. So you're very focused on that. But I'd always want to work for certainly a line manager and an organization that's future thinking to start with, that embraces the technology that we've just talked about, whilst managing my own personal ways of my preferences for learning, but also has enough skills to help me to become better at what I want to do. I want to see how I can not just be the number one salesperson, but so what happens after that?
Yeah.
And I want to then learn those skills, emotional intelligence. So what are the learning journeys? I think the learning paths, learning journeys, call it what you like, that organizations offer to sales individuals, people in the sales force, probably is not as robust as it needs to be. I think there's opportunities to make that better.
Yeah.
And that's where coaching skills, emotional intelligence skills, not forgetting the IQ, because I think professional qualifications and certainly the world of regulation is tightening up, which is a positive. So you have to keep yourself up to speed with that. But it then ties back into how people like to learn, right? It's not being dictated by how we've always done it traditionally. How you and I probably were taught may or may not work for people now. They want different things at different times, right?
Yeah, yeah. And we're also dealing with emotional people when they're coming to our organization, when they're coming into the organization, they are humans with emotions. So hence, to enhance that and for them to know that is one of the critical aspects because that also reflects on, I would say, the culture of the organization, which we touched upon, because salespeople needs to be motivated at every point in time because of the pressures they go through, right? And it depends on the kind of the culture the organization is built that drives their engagement with the clients, and that will reflect. So if the culture of the organization believes that we have to be human centric, and because we're dealing with clients who are who are like partners or family to them, they need to have emotional quotient developed within their own people. So your internal customers are more important than your
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? And something that's just come to mind as you're talking. I think it's about how people, human beings, adapt to change. And one of the things that I always bring to the table, so whenever I'm managing a new team, sales team, general team, I always bring up on a slide the Kubler-Ross change curve, just to help people understand what change feels like and why it's okay to feel like you're feeling with change. And I think with anything like the environment we're working in now, communication is really important.
Yes.
And what I've learned, maybe it's through a bit of maturity and feedback that I've acquired over the years, that when you're managing a team of high performers, one, to earn the right to be their manager or supervisor is a decent level of communication, and being transparent with that communication, honest and open feedback. I've always found if it's delivered in the right way to salespeople, especially if it's going to help them to improve their numbers, it's wonderful. There's a lot of really good tools out there. You've got AI sort of based coaching tools that can rewind and also give immediate feedback. All of this stuff, if it's embraced and used in the right way, again, I just make the point, it's just a tool, but if it's supported and it's sort of embedded in the culture of the organization, that's a place I'd like to work.
Yeah, right? That'll be brilliant. That's interesting. So does that mean that when we give all of this, what we mentioned, like a culture of learning and, having the right coaches to the sales teams, do you see that is, I would say, taken very positively by the salespeople? Because one of the things I've also seen among salespeople, seasoned salespeople, is that they've arrived, they've been there for 20 years, they've been doing certain things, they're high performers, the reasons why they're performing really well. But when it comes to probably learning new things from coaches or being coached, there's a lot of resistance. In your coaching experience, how do you break this? Break the ice or break this mindset? And I think we touched upon the mindset. Like, how do you break that mindset that what you've been doing may have worked then, but how open are you to learn new things? Because it's important, right? Things are changing outside.
Correct, right? And I think there's a couple of ways to answer that as well. So if I go right the way back from taking that person into the team in the first place, as an individual manager or sales leader, I need to be sure that that is also the right person for the fit of the culture and the organization. So psychometric assessments, for example, could be used at that point. And within that, there could be a DNA of the typical individual that I'm looking to bring in to the business. So it could be tested up front. Right. I think I also need to be very clear if I'm bringing somebody into my team. There is a point around open and honest feedback and being clear that they have to have this as part of the day-to-day part of being in the successful sales team. Building a high-performing team with people of different generations and different experiences is not easy.
Yeah.
And I've done it a few times. And it's a level of respect and trust that you have to have with every single individual member in that team. My biggest team in the region was 17 people, all of different ages, all of different generations, all with different needs. Now, if I manage them all in the same way, I will fail, right? However, if I use what's available for me in terms of my own development as a leader, using the latest technology, opening my own mind to this, I've got an opportunity to actually really get underneath the skin of each individual. And I think that's my big tip. I treat everybody as an individual and part of the collective towards the common goal.
Right.
If somebody in the team has been successful and is successful, of course I'm going to respect that, because in sales, one of the things that's important is the numbers at the end of the day, because you're here to drive the numbers. Maybe I would change my tact a little bit there and see how I can get them to mentor some of those skills across some of the junior teams. So teach them some of the historical skills and also embed the reverse mentoring with some of the newer members of the team that have maybe come out of university not so many years ago. So we can create that real culture of learning in the team, and it's okay to do that. That's probably how I tackle it.
Amazing. So coming to learning in that case, I mean, of course, we're building that whole ecosystem and, helping the leaders see how they should be tackling and, letting the coaches know what kind of people, in different roles we have in sales and their competencies and their skills. Do you also see that it is important to involve salespeople when there is this whole intervention happening? Because I don't see that often happening. It operates in silos, a lot of organizations, right? L&D operates in one silo. HR team is completely looking at certain things. Leadership, business wants revenue, and they're saying like, get me the revenue. That's the review and the cadence they have. How often, two questions here, right? One, is it important to involve the salespeople in this entire intervention? Two, do you see organizations really doing this often? And do you think that by doing it or not doing it, there could be a difference?
So yes, to the first question, I think it's important that they should be involved in the process. And having been through this myself as a salesperson years ago, one of the opportunities, and I use that very clearly, that I was given as being part of a talent pool was to be moved across the different functions of the organization. So what that enabled me to do, through the good foresight of my manager and senior leadership team at the time, gave me that opportunity to move into different things to learn new skills, right? So to answer your question, yes, they definitely should be. Do we do it enough? Probably not. No. I think we need to probably think a little bit more about that, but also zoom out a little bit, because you may have some fantastic individuals that are very good at sales, but what else could they be good at? What else, what other core skills do they have that could actually lead and drive that organization in different ways? Learning sales at a very early age in my career has stuck with me ever since, and everything I've done, because I feel there's always something that you are dropping into that skill set to pull to sell something. So I think it's something that you could learn at an early age and see right the way through. But do we engage them enough? Probably not, as I said, because I think they're the front line generating revenue. But if the smart leaders in organizations took the time to investigate and really to look at, what talent management really means, not just putting people on a course and ticking a box, but really owning that person's learning journey with them. So partnering with them so they can really see how they can be the best they can be, realize their true potential, I guess, without sounding too cheesy. That would get me excited as well if I was in that position. But I'm hoping that kind of gives you a bit of a context.
No, that's brilliant. And I think that also relates to the fact that helps you retain good people. Because one of the challenges I'm sure you would have faced in the domain you're in, with talent and HR function and L&D and working with businesses, one of the biggest challenges would be, I'm losing good people. Or I don't know whether they're good people, but I'm losing people. Might be losing good people in the in the process of assuming that they can't do their role. And it goes back to your point. You said, how are you assessing them right in the beginning before you get them on board to see the fitment of people within that role?
Yep.
So I guess retaining becomes such an important, it's effect, which would be like you would be able to retain good people if you can involve them. Yeah, that's
Look, the war for
interesting.
talent is not going to get any easier. I think regionally we all understand what that means. To grow, the cost of bringing people in is high at times when, you know, many organisations are looking at their cost income ratios and wanting to keep them flat and reverse them where possible. So the opportunity to grow salespeople in-house and, you know, maximize out their value for themselves and for the organization, the potential is massive. And I think we've got a great opportunity to do that. Sometimes, and again, I'm only speaking from my time in sales many years back, can be quite an isolated role. You can be just, that's what you do and that's all you're known to do. And it takes sometimes somebody to spot that talent, get these people involved in different things, that then the business really grows with that person, and that person enables to develop a really decent career. But the war for talent is toughening up. So we have to think differently, right?
Amazing. So I think the cost of not investing in your talent and not involving is far bigger. It's like you might lose good people. So it's better you invest and retain them, because otherwise, like you rightly, I mean, I love the point you said, it's only getting tougher, because with the technology, which is really going at that pace, and salespeople trying to adapt to it, and then getting talent from in that whole domain is such a critical aspect, and it's becoming very, very difficult for organizations to find that perfect match. So you rather invest in your existing and enable them and enhance them.
Yeah, and I think just to build on that, it's not just about them, it's about the managers and the leaders and the senior team that supports that, because you know, it's the old adage, it's not always the organization people leave, it can be maybe a not so good manager, right?
Absolutely.
Or leader. So it's about making sure that you don't just target one aspect of that. It's about managing all of those you know, touch points that the individual would have, because you really want to try and make that a great experience. I know for a fact that I follow certain leaders around different organizations because I love their leadership style. I love the collaboration. I love the trust. I love the honesty. They're all things, as well as the financial remuneration, that motivate me. And they're all things that, you know, we need to think about. In the old days, or the old ways of managing salespeople, which is hitting numbers and that's it, you have to now think differently as a leader, because if you don't, you will lose your top performing salespeople, and that obviously will impact your P&L. So it's about the way in which you strategically think around managing your talent in the sales space is very important, and not just focusing on the frontline sales team and you know, giving them an opportunity to go on a course. It's about how does that get supported? Who are their mentors? Who do they go to for coaching? What tools can they use to coach if the manager can't be there to support them all the time? And it's thinking more broadly. Those organizations that are doing that, I would suggest, will be far more successful than those that don't.
Amazing. So investing not only in your frontline who are there on the ground, but your managers, because I love the statement you mentioned, right? People leave managers more than they leaving organizations. So that's such a critical aspect of really enabling your managers into how they're dealing with their salespeople to ensure that you get the best out of your team. And then, of course, it kind of resonates to the entire organization. I would love to know about your journey from sales to HR, because you said your early days of your life was sales and then you moved to HR. It's such a, you know, that'll follow with another question, which I'm so curious to know. And
no problem.
I'm sure the audience would love to know that. One is the journey from sales to HR. What really got you to do that? And two is that, which means that as a salesperson, you can fit into any function. Is that transition, is it simple or is it difficult?
All right, so I'll try and answer that. The journey part, so I think there's a part that before sales, that's important to highlight, and it comes around customer centricity. I learned very early on when I was working with customers, building the rapport, which is what we talked about earlier, getting somebody to really only want to come and see you. That's actually quite a special feeling. So I had customers, even before I touched sales, that loved coming to talk to me, and I loved talking to them. So I learnt that there was a core desire to help people, and that's never left me. So as I transitioned into sales and had the opportunity to do that, I was fortunately supported by some really good individuals, great managers, tough managers. You know, they wanted the results, but they obviously were very happy to share that with me. So I went through sales, ended up into regulated sales, and then ended up training regulated sales to a regulated sales force back in the UK, which again was a wonderful experience. That transition from there to the wider HR was interesting because I met somebody after winning a competition, and this is the importance of networking for salespeople. So I learned that relatively early. I ended up having a really good conversation with a very senior director who actually asked me some good questions around my career, and I said, like, I'd always loved to get involved in some sales training. So I love talking to customers, and I think I've demonstrated that I'm not too bad at sales. So he ended up setting up a secondment for me to get involved in sales training in a place called Ongar in Essex many years ago. And we had a fantastic country house that the business owned at the time. And it was just such an immense experience. And what I learned from that is that there was a whole set of skills that were just waiting to come out that until I'd entered it, I'd never even realized that a career in HR was possible. So I entered through that route by winning a competition, good mentoring and good networking skills, and then obviously an opportunity for a secondment so I could try before I buy. Absolutely fell in love with sales training. Sales, I'm very passionate about it, but customer-centric sales, not just driving numbers. Maybe this is a bit of an old school thought, but I believe if you look after your customers look after you.
Absolutely.
And I've always had that. So that was the catalyst. And then suddenly I entered this world of HR. So I became inquisitive, which I think is a skill that I still hold to this day. I never settle for knowing everything. I always believe I can learn more. And I'm very okay with that. I love feedback. So one of the things that I thrive on is getting some honest feedback, which I got. And then suddenly entered into sales training, ended up managing London and South East training teams. Had another mentor at that point who was fantastic and said, look, everybody knows you in the sales training, sales space. So I'm going to challenge you a little bit. What's stopping you from getting a wider HR experience than what you've got? So I actually was massively uncomfortable, out of my comfort zone, and I went in to be a HR business partner. So I transitioned to a HR business partner and spent 5 years senior HR business partner, was involved in some very senior divestments of organizations, which is why I have no hair left now, because that was pretty scary, but massively enjoyable. But I think it comes also back down to not expecting everything to be put on a plate for you. It's about working hard and go and get it. But the skills that you learn in sales have been with me through my entire career. But again, they're all driven from customer centricity. How can I help? How can I help that person to become the best that they can be? How can I help that business really, put an impact on that bottom line? How can I support the development of that culture by being part of it? Collaboration skills, owning what I do and being accountable for that. They're all the things that are important to me. And there's a set of ethics that I run by, and I deliver what I promise. And that's so important to me. So I'm hoping that kind of answered it. You might have to remind me on the second part of the question, because I think I've gone off at a slight tangent. But
no, you answered both in the same way. But
cool.
So it's very interesting to know. And what I was drawing out of this whole conversation was salespeople can be good HR leaders. Well, look, because customer centricity you're talking about, because it's about human, right? Human resources and in true sense is what typically salespeople should be looking into and thinking about That's what I drew out of this conversation. It's amazing.
Yeah, look, and it may not be for everybody.
Yeah.
And some salespeople that I've met are very focused on just wanting to be in the sales arena, and for the reasons stated, that's what motivates them and drives them. And let's be honest, there's nothing better when that sense of fulfillment, knowing that you just landed a massive big deal or
Of
that
course.
hit all your targets. It's just such a wonderful feeling. But
Yeah.
again, making the point, may not be for everybody, but the skills that you learn through
Yeah.
customer centricity and sales are massively transferable.
Yeah.
But you have to almost wake yourself up to go and be uncomfortable, put yourself into an uncomfortable position to go and test and try. For me,
Right.
HR worked out fantastic. I've had some wonderful experiences, and I worked out what I liked and what I didn't like. And, having done all of those other roles in HR, my passion was around talent development, and that's where I've ended up. I've done the IQ bit, so I'm
Right.
FCIPD qualified. I've done all of the HR parts
Yeah.
to support it.
Yeah.
And I continue to learn now as an executive coach. I coach that into people that are aspiring to transfer or change their careers. So look, I can talk to you all day about that. That's my other passion.
I love that. I'm enjoying this. So, Craig, does that mean that if somebody comes to you as a resource from sales, and you being in the talent development area, if they come to you and say, I want to move into HR, what is that 3 things you would look at if you have to place that person at HR? And generally that's not seen as a natural thing in organizations, that if I go from finance to sales, like, come on, sales is a different function. Finance cannot do sales, or sales cannot do. It's always like looked as a function rather than people able to do certain roles. What would you see in that person to really fight for that person with the hiring manager to take the person in there?
All right. So let's zoom out a little bit, right? And I think we talked about this earlier. Gone are the days where we look at CVs and put people
Yes.
into things. The experience helps, right? So
Yeah.
obviously we all have a CV so we can evidence the journey we've been on. What I specifically look for right now is the skills and competencies of those individuals. And if you look at the way the world is shaping up now, this is something that we as leaders have to think about. So competencies of that individual, what are the skills of that individual? So it may be, if I've worked with them, if I've mentored them, I know what I'm getting, and I would give, if I'm mentoring, obviously I'm giving advice and guidance. If I'm coaching, I'm asking questions. But typically I would have a really good sense of that person and their appetite to do that. I think the reality of helping them understand what a transition feels like, and we've used HR, they could go anywhere. You could move to treasury or different parts of different organizations, IT, wherever it is. It's almost what's driven, what your heart is telling you. What's your purpose? What do you really want to achieve? Classic coaching questions. And I think it's a combination of marrying them all up. So all of those points, skills, competencies, desire, appetite to learn, a real passion for the subject that's displayed in many different ways, can be supported with psychometric assessments and stuff, and evidence of them wanting to really do it. And I think if I see that in somebody, they may not have all of the core skills. If I've got that, that sort of accumulation of the passion, the desire, all of that, I believe a manager, he or she worth his salt, can support and develop that passion and grow it. So let's ignite that passion.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Linking it back to sales, right?
Keep igniting that passion.
But
right?
it comes with a health warning too. It's not for everybody, and it may, going into HR, may not be what people want to do. But I think when I'm managing talent, I'm always looking at the skills of that individual and the competencies, and how we could actually use those skills in different parts of the organization to help the organization grow. And I'm very okay with moving people into different positions, giving them the right support to allow them to have those experiences, because that's how I learn. Not everything I enjoyed,
right?
But that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, that's the process of learning as well. Yeah, but not many would be wise or open enough to explore. So in that scenario, what would you advise a salesperson to be ready with when they're going and talking to their talent team and to their HR that, hey, I want to shift roles? What do you think they should be ready with, so that do they do a psychometric and say, this is my score and this is why I'm good at sales? Or, if they're lucky, they bump into someone like you and you're able to see through because you've evolved, right, as an individual. And you have really developed yourself. That's your mindset. But 8 out of 10 may not be like that. So how do they manage that?
Again, I'm not sure there's one simple answer to that question because it could be in multiple ways. But I think, again, if I share my learning, it's not being afraid to network with people that are in those positions to start to get a real sense. I think now we have tools like LinkedIn that's been around for a few years. You can research people, get yourself hooked up with a good mentor, somebody that's really got all of the badges and maybe war wounds of being in that role and have been in that role for a while. So you can get a really good, deep understanding about it. I think from your HR teams, it's staying close to if you have a HR business partner model, it's knowing who your HR business partners are and socializing with them and having conversations to say, look, this is something I'm thinking about. If you have a talent manager or a talent set up in your organization, like many do, it's about how do I get myself into that space? What's the definition of talent? Do I meet that criteria? Is there an opportunity to put myself into that comfort or uncomfortable zone, for want of a better phrase, and be okay to live with it? As I said, I don't think there's one sort of simple solution to this. I think there's different ways, but also use technology, right? So, even down to your basics of ChatGPT and type that in as a prompt. This is where I am in my career. How do I get here? You'll be amazed at what it can put up and some ideas to support that transition. Honestly, though, it has to come from your head and your heart, right? Because if you want something badly enough in life, you'll go and get it. I wanted to be a very good sales trainer, and I wanted to transition out of frontline sales into that. It was a very difficult process, but I was dedicated and committed to make that work. So it's got to come from within just as much as people coming to the table with opportunities, I would suggest.
And that will also mean that you develop skills as you keep going. If you can't just wake up one fine day and say, I want to move into HR. It's a process. You have to feel a sense of purpose, is what you're saying. But at the same time, technical skills to add on will also give you self-confidence about, to really talk about it, like, rather than just being very philosophical about it, that I want to be in HR and this is what I want to do.
Correct.
So I guess skill development is a self-responsibility, is what I always believe in, right?
Yes,
it's about you have to take ownership and be accountable for that, and then speak about it and bring in the other elements. I love what you said, like networking is such an important aspect to really understand what are you getting into, talk to. And here is where I always see that when we talk about find your mentors, the question comes that where do I find them? There's no one answer, like you rightly said. There's no one answer to a situation, but you go out there, talk to people, connect with them, understand whether they are ready to really, help you, mentor you, and if not, then move on, find many more. There's no one person you go to, right? So I feel mentorship is such a critical aspect in formulating your career and your personal life, I guess.
Correct. And I think, and you'll probably be the same as me, there are people that you meet in your life that have been key turning points.
Yes.
I can tell you who, I'm not going to for confidentiality, but there are key people in my career that at key moments, they did things that inspired me beyond belief to think I can do this.
Right.
Mixed with a combination of a passion and desire to want to go and do it.
Yes.
And that opportunity that then could be there if it's worked on and created. So it has to start with the individual. You can't just assume and expect. If you've got a real passion and desire inside, it's like hitting a sales target and a number. If that's what motivates you, and again, I draw this back to good management and leadership. If you can see somebody's really motivated by that part of their development, that's a fantastic way in which you can demonstrate that you're helping them to grow. Because they may be hitting all of the sales targets, but they're going to feel pretty motivated that they're getting supported to grow and develop a bigger career than just what they're doing. But I do believe, in all my experience, and there may be people that disagree, and that's okay, but I believe if you are a good salesperson, the skills that you learn, as long as you are ethically correct and you're selling to the standards and codes of conducts that your organization's expecting and global standards, they're massively transferable skills. And I've used them in all sorts of roles that I've done, and I continue to do it now. And I think that was probably one of the best bits of learning I ever had, how to become good at sales. Because if you can do that, then it's around, so what else can I do? And that's the inquisitive mindset I'd recommend. Right?
Yeah. And I think that also will reflect in your personal life. because the compassion and the human emotion which you're creating, it also reflects back. So I think as a sales person and you're developing those skills, it's both. It's just not for the organization, it's for the self, which kind of, and today when we say personal, professional, it's all kind of got mixed up. You spend more time with your colleagues than back with your family. So it's so important to keep that aspect at the center of it. And I think sales, for me, I think I'll be very biased about when it comes to sales, because I've been in sales for 30 years, and I feel that sales gives you that opportunity to really become a rounded professional, and which skills can be transferable, which beautifully said. So how does the future of sales look like as we're wrapping up? I thought it'll be interesting to hear from a HR, L&D talent perspective. What is the future of sales, people and sales as a function?
I think the future of sales will change with technology. So that needs to be embraced by everybody that's operating in the sales space. I think the future of sales is bright, but it's just like anything. You'll have to change how you do things to become good at embracing the future requirements of sales. I don't know if that makes sense. But what I'm trying to say is, because the world will change, customers' needs will change, even the way we work. And you alluded to this around that mix around how people work at home. So you've got your hybrid working, remote working, office working. Lots of different organizations have current views on that, and that's changing around the world. So I think the skill is to not lose sight of customer centricity, right? Always, that's number one. I think making sure that you don't forget the core human building of relationships and trust and emotional intelligence. I think they're all the bits that need to come into that, supported with good mentoring and coaching, as I said before. But I think the way in which sales are done, the principles will always be the principles, and it's that emotion and the skill of being able to take somebody on that journey. How we take them on the journey will evolve and change. Some of that may be tech based, it may be a hybrid tech based, may go back to some proper human interaction. And I've seen that as well, where some people have, I've had this feedback to me, say, Craig, look, fantastic, we've got all the technical courses, we just want to talk to a human. Can we just talk to you? Can we just talk to you about that? So there's also a sort of evolving. So you have to be agile. You have to be on the pulse of exactly what's happening in that space, and don't assume just because you're good at it and you've been in there a few years that it will happen. And my last piece, I always use this as an analogy to people that are going through change and transition. And we look at Burj Khalifa. If you can imagine you were standing on the top of that 15 years ago, what would you have seen? You would have seen camels, desert.
Dust,
correct.
Mud,
You go there now and you look across, what do you see if you're on the top viewing tower?
Beautiful landscape, lights and structures.
The piece that I'll then, 15 years from now, you're in the same spot, what are you going to see?
Maybe a lot more structures, a lot more bridges, and a lot more light and glamour.
Ubercopters and stuff like that?
Helicopters, flying taxis.
Correct. Fundamentally, the question I then follow up with is, how much of that as an individual can you control?
None, actually.
None of it.
None.
Because it's going to happen whether you like it or not. So this comes back to the final piece. It's a mindset. If you want something, you have to embrace change. You have to have a mindset that is open to change. You have to embrace the technology and the skills that will be expected of you in a sales environment. Not maybe, but they will.
Will be,
So your levels of competence and skill in that space, you always have to be forward thinking. And also maybe keep your eyes in the rearview mirror to see who's coming up behind you that's actually developing those skills at a faster rate, because things happen and change, right? So
evolving,
change is here to stay. I think the sales processes will be thereabouts. The way in which we use technology to get us to that end result will be there, but it will depend on what the client wants. And that comes back, my final part, always drive it back to customer centricity. What is it that works for your client? And it comes back to that point I said earlier around, how do you like to learn? And I've asked many sales managers, sales leaders, and even managers generally, when was the last time you asked your team how they like to learn? Or do you assume?
We always assume. I think it's always assumption. That's a beautiful question, which every manager should ask, so that there's inclusivity and you're actually getting feedback from them as to how would they like to be looked as a part of.
Great.
That's a brilliant statement. Brilliant statement. So, Craig, thank you so much. The conversation is. I would love to keep going on. It's your experience, your expertise, and your insights have been really, really valuable. And what I take away is, and I'm sure the audience will take away a lot more than what I'm going to say now, is customer centricity, but fundamentally having that genuine interest to develop yourself. And everything revolves down to a balance between technology and human. And at sometimes maybe the human connections really supersedes, and sometimes technology would. But being agile and adaptive is the key to being successful, or rather being relevant. I wouldn't say successful because it's a very relative word, right? Success is a relative word. So being relevant and keep evolving. So thank you so much, Craig. And to the audience, to all of you, if you really found this invaluable, I found it really, really invaluable. Valuable. If you want to hear more from such experts, please keep sharing your insights, your inputs as to what kind of topics would you like to hear. What kind of functions would you want me to, functional experts would you like me to bring to our studio and have the conversation. Until we meet next time, keep igniting the conversation, keep customer centricity at your core, and do not forget the emotional quotient. And being human is such a critical aspect in today's world and always will be.